of machinery filled the air. The first true steps toward healing had begun. The scars of rebellion and caste division ran deep, etched into the faces and hearts of every citizen. Yet, in the grand central hall, lit by the warm flicker of countless lanterns, Princess Alara stood resolute. Her silver hair glimmered like a beacon against the dim backdrop as she addressed the crowd gathered from every corner of the city. Nobles draped in fine silks, artisans with calloused hands, mechanics stained with soot, and children wide-eyed with curiosity and hope. We have all known hardship. Ilara's voice carried steadily through the hall, weaving through the murmurs and restless shuffles. We have all been shaped by the walls and the iron gears that hold our city aloft. But those walls need not bind us forever. Together we can forge a new future where our dreams take flight, not because of the caste we were born into, but because of the courage we share. The words were not empty promises. They were the culmination of months of tireless work with Kale, her partner not only in love but in leadership. Their journey from forbidden connection to united front was a tapestry threaded with risk, hope, and unyielding resolve. Kale moved through the lower city's bustling streets, the scents of oil, metal, and fresh bread mingling in the air. His dark tousled hair caught the sun's rare rays as he exchanged nods and brief smiles with mechanics, artisans, and shopkeepers alike. Each interaction reaffirmed the fragile trust they had begun to build. The rebellion had been a firestorm, but now it was time for steady flames, for rebuilding, for listening, for healing. He paused before a small workshop where Jorin was teaching young apprentices the delicate art of engine repair. The stocky man's broad shoulders and calloused hands were a familiar comfort, a grounding presence amid the city's shifting tides. Together, they had navigated perilous nights and fierce battles, and now their focus was to transform rebellion into lasting change. Meanwhile, Myra's hidden courtyard echoed with the sharp rhythm of wooden staffs striking against one another. Her curly auburn hair bounced with each practiced movement as she trained a new generation of defenders. These were not just warriors but protectors of a fragile peace, their eyes alight with determination and the weight of responsibility. Myra's journey from handmaid to fierce warrior was emblematic of the city's own transformation from oppression to empowerment. Yet the path was far from smooth. In the stately council chambers, Lady Isolde's stern visage bore the marks of years spent guarding tradition. Now, the lines of age softened her features, and though her robes still spoke of the old order, her voice carried a reluctant openness. The council's debates were heated, shadows of doubt flickering in whispered corridors and tense meetings. Old rivalries and fears of chaos threatened to unravel progress with every step forward. Alara and Kale found themselves mediators not just of policy but of hearts and histories. They convened community dialogues where grievances aired alongside aspirations, where nobles listened to mechanics and artisans shared their dreams with the once distant rulers. Cooperative projects blossomed, shared workshops, open training grounds, festivals, celebrating the city's diverse talents and cultures. Every success was a fragile thread woven into the city's new fabric. But beneath the surface, mistrust lingered like a stubborn fog. Old wounds reopened in unexpected moments. Whispered accusations and silent glances reminded all that true unity was still a distant horizon. Alara's nights were restless, haunted by memories of loss and the heavy weight of expectation. Kale's hands, so skilled at mending engines, trembled sometimes under the strain of leadership. Yet their shared resolve remained unbroken. On one such evening, as the city's lights sparkled like stars caught in glass, Alara and Kale stood atop the highest platform. The wind teased their hair, the scent of steam and metal filling their senses. They looked out over the city, a city bruised but breathing, fractured but healing. "We've come far," Cale said quietly, his sharp green eyes reflecting the glow below. Ilara smiled, a mixture of exhaustion and hope. "And there's still so much to do. But now, we face it together." Their hands found each other's, a silent promise amidst the shifting gears of a world being remade. The city's future was uncertain, the challenges formidable, but in that moment, the soaring dreams of all its people seemed just within reach. As the first stars blinked awake overhead, the echoes of rebellion softened into the steady pulse of rebuilding, a city learning to trust again, one heartbeat at a time, and with that trust, the promise of a new dawn. But even as hope blossomed, a lingering question remained. Could love and unity truly conquer the deep divides etched into the city's very soul? The answer lay not in grand speeches or fleeting victories, but in the quiet, relentless work of rebuilding trust, day by day, heart by heart. The Grand Council chamber was a mosaic of old and new. Sunlight streamed through stained glass, casting kaleidoscopic colors upon the polished marble floor, lighting the faces of nobles clad in heavy silks and intricate brocades. Princess Ilara stood at the center, her silver hair catching the light and her pale blue eyes glinting with unwavering resolve. The hum of whispered conversations subsided as she raised her hands, commanding silence. "Esteemed members of the council," Ilara began, her voice steady but vibrant with urgency. "The winds of change are upon our city. Our people have suffered under the weight of division for too long. The rebellion, the failures in our machines, and the cries from the lower castes are not signs of chaos, but calls for renewal. We cannot cling to the past at the expense of our future." She paced slowly, every word measured and purposeful. "We must dismantle the barriers that have kept us imprisoned within our own castes. We must embrace a society where the sky's freedom is not a privilege of birth, but a right of all." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some faces displayed skepticism, others flickers of hope. At the far end, Lady Isolde stood rigid, her sharp features carved by years of stern counsel. Her dark hair was pulled back into a tight bun, and her austere gown reflected the gravity she carried. For a moment, she said nothing, watching Ilara with an unreadable expression. The meeting adjourned with much left unsaid. In the dimly lit hallway beyond, Lady Isolde lingered, clutching a folded letter Ilara had sent earlier that day. The letter was a plea not for blind loyalty, but for understanding. Her fingers trembled slightly as she unfolded the parchment, eyes scanning the heartfelt words. A conflict rose within her, a lifetime bound to tradition, wrestling with the undeniable truth of a changing world. Meanwhile, far below, in the underbelly of the city, Cale and Myra worked side by side in the cavernous workshop beneath the floating metropolis. The hiss of escaping steam and the rhythmic clink of metal tools punctuated their synchronized labor. Cale's soot-streaked face was set in concentration, his sharp green eyes reflecting the flicker of oil lamps. Myra's agile hands moved deftly, tightening bolts and adjusting delicate gears. "This engine holds more than power," Cale murmured, wiping sweat from his brow. "It's the key to breaking our chains." Myra nodded, her sharp dark eyes alight with fierce determination. "And with Ilara leading from above, maybe this time change will come without bloodshed." Their camaraderie was a quiet rebellion in itself, a bond forged not just by shared goals, but by hope for a better tomorrow. Back in the palace gardens, a gentle breeze stirred the leaves, carrying the scent of blooming nightshade and fresh rain. Ilara walked alongside Lady Isolde, their steps slow and deliberate on the gravel path. For once, the usual tension between them softened. "I never thought I would see the day when you'd walk beside me willingly," Ilara said, glancing at her advisor. Lady Isolde's voice was low, edged with vulnerability. "I never thought I'd find myself questioning everything I was taught to believe. But the city is changing, Princess. Perhaps it's time I changed with it." Ilara smiled faintly, the promise of alliance shimmering between them like the first rays of dawn. "Together, we can guide this city into a new era, one where the sky is open to all, and the past's shadows no longer hold us captive." The palace bells tolled softly, marking the passage of time and the fragile hope blossoming amid the winds of change. Yet, beneath the surface, questions lingered. Would the council embrace this fragile alliance? Could old wounds heal before new ones formed? As night fell, Ilara retired to her chambers, the weight of leadership settling anew on her shoulders. She traced the intricate patterns of a mechanical blueprint spread across her desk, dreams of flight and freedom etched in every line. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but also the possibility of unity. Lady Isolde, alone in her quarters, unfolded the letter once more. Her eyes softened as she read Ilara's words, a reluctant smile touching her lips. "For the first time, I believe in the promise of change," she whispered to the shadows. Outside, the city breathed a living machine of gears and steam, hope and fear, tradition and revolution. The winds carried the scent of oil and blossoms, of past conflicts and future dreams. And as the stars blinked awake above the floating city, a new chapter began, not just for Ilara and Kale, but for all who dared to dream beyond the caste lines that once divided them. The winds of change were no longer whispers in the dark. They had become a roaring gale, ready to sweep the city into a future forged by courage, unity, and the unbreakable bonds of love. But even as hope blossomed, shadows lingered. Old alliances would be tested, loyalties strained, and the true cost of transformation had yet to be revealed. Ilara closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the world and the lightness of possibility entwined within her heart. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was theirs to walk side by side against the storm. As the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, a single thought echoed in her mind. The sky was no longer a limit, but an invitation, and they were ready to soar. The air hung heavy over the city, dense with the mingled scents of oil, rain, and the ever-present steam that rose from the countless vents scattered across the floating metropolis. Princess Ilara stood on the balcony of her chamber, the ornate iron rail cold beneath her fingertips. Her silver hair gleamed faintly in the waning light, a stark contrast to the darkening skies above. Below, the city sprawled endlessly, a complex labyrinth of brass and steel, gears and pipes, a marvel of mechanical ingenuity and social division. Tonight, the usual symphony of hissing steam and clanking machinery seemed muted, as if the city itself braced for what was to come. Ilara's pale blue eyes traced the horizon where the sun sank behind the jagged spires of the lower castes. Her heart ached with the weight of everything she had lost, and everything she still stood to lose. She turned inward, retreating from the balcony's chill and the restless city. The room felt smaller than ever, the lavish tapestries and gilded furniture oppressive rather than comforting. Somewhere beyond these walls, Kale and the rebellion fought desperately, risking everything. And yet, here she was, confined by royal duty and the expectations that came with her name. A soft knock at the door pulled her from her thoughts. Myra entered swiftly, her auburn curls slightly disheveled, eyes dark and urgent. "Your Highness," Myra began, her voice tight with emotion. "We've lost another. Yolande didn't make it through the raid last night." Ilara's breath hitched. Yolande was one of the rebels closest to Kale, a young mechanic with a spark of hope that had seemed unbreakable. She swallowed hard, fighting the lump in her throat. "How?" she asked quietly. "Caught in a crossfire near the eastern vents. The guards were ruthless. They've tightened their grip since your relationship with Kale was exposed." Ilara closed her eyes, clutching the locket she always wore, a gift from her mother, now a symbol of the past and the uncertain future. The rebellion's cost was more than political. It bled into every corner of her life. Meanwhile, deep within the shadowed depths of the lower city, Kale and Joran sat amidst scattered tools and fractured blueprints. The workshop was dim, lit only by flickering gas lamps that cast long shadows on the soot-streaked walls. Both bore fresh bruises and dirt smudged across their faces, souvenirs of a skirmish that had nearly cost them their lives. "We can't keep losing people like this," Joran muttered, voice rough. "They're getting smarter, more brutal." Kale rubbed a hand over his jaw, eyes sharp despite exhaustion. "We knew the risks when we started this. But giving up isn't an option, not when the city's core is failing and the people suffer." Joran nodded slowly, the fire of conviction mingling with the weariness in his gaze. "Still, it's hard. Friends falling, trust breaking. Sometimes I wonder if we're just trading one cage for another." Kale's fingers tightened into a fist. "We're fighting for a future where no one is caged by birth or blood. That future is worth every scar." Back in the palace, the news of Jalen's death settled heavily on Ilara's shoulders. She paced the room, the delicate fabric of her dress whispering against the floor. Mira watched silently, her own turmoil evident but unspoken. "I don't want to lose you," Mira finally said, voice trembling. "You're the hope for us all, but the crown is turning against you. Lord Varric grows more ruthless by the day." Ilara stopped, eyes fierce, despite the tears threatening to fall. "Then I will show them that hope cannot be crushed, that change is not only necessary, it is inevitable." That night, beneath a quilt of stars and the cool breaths of the night air, Ilara and Kale met atop the city's highest spire. The wind tugged gently at their clothes, carrying with it the distant echoes of rebellion and the hum of the city's intricate heart. Their hands found one another, fingers entwining with a desperate tenderness born from shared loss and unyielding hope. "We've paid too high a price," Ilara whispered, voice raw but unwavering. "But I won't let the sacrifices be in vain." Kale's green eyes burned with quiet fire. "Together, we'll build a new world, one where no child fears the sky because of who they are." They lingered there, wrapped in the fragile promise of dawn, knowing the path ahead would be fraught with danger and heartache. Yet, in that moment, their love was a beacon, defiant, unbroken, and fiercely alive. As the first light crept over the horizon, Ilara and Kale stepped back from the edge, ready to face whatever the future held. The price of freedom was steep, but they would pay it together. And so the city beneath them stirred, its gears turning ever onward, carrying the hopes and dreams of those brave enough to fight for the sky. The days that followed were a blur of whispered meetings, hurried plans, and stolen moments. The rebellion pressed forward, their ranks tempered by grief yet galvanized by purpose. Ilara found herself at the center of a storm, balancing the demands of leadership with the fragile threads of her personal life. Myra's own secret romance added a bittersweet layer to the turmoil. The handmaid's courage inspired Ilara, even as it reminded her of the risks they all faced. Joran's steadfast presence was a balm to Kale's restless spirit, a reminder that even amidst chaos, friendship could endure. But Lord Varric's shadow loomed large, his cold gaze sweeping across the city like a storm cloud ready to burst. His forces tightened their grip, hunting the rebels with relentless precision. In one tense confrontation, Alara stood before the ruling council, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. She spoke not as a princess bound by tradition, but as a leader of a new dawn. Our city cannot thrive, shackled by fear and division, she declared. We must embrace change, or we will crumble beneath the weight of our own making. Whispers rippled through the chamber. Some faces betrayed fear, others grudging respect. Lord Varric's cold eyes narrowed, but Alara met his gaze without flinching. The battle for the city's soul had reached its crescendo, and though the cost was grave, the promise of freedom burned brighter than ever. As night fell once more, Alara and Kale stood side by side, gazing out over a city on the brink. Their journey was far from over, but their hearts beat as one a defiant rhythm against the darkness. No matter what comes, Kale said softly, we face it together. Alara smiled, a fierce light in her eyes. Together. And with that, they stepped forward into the uncertain dawn, ready to claim the sky and their destiny. The air was thick with anticipation and the faint hiss of steam-powered engines as the citizens of the floating city gathered. In the grand plaza, vast open space suspended among the clouds, framed by gleaming brass railings and intricate ironwork that shimmered golden in the late afternoon sun. Today was unlike any other in the city's long history. The rigid social order that had divided its people for generations was beginning to crumble. And with it came the first public flying lessons and mechanical apprenticeship programs open to all castes. Princess Alara stood at the forefront of the ceremony, her silver hair catching the sunlight like strands of spun light. Gone was the restrictive royal gown she had once worn. Instead, she donned a lighter ceremonial dress woven with symbols of unity, delicate pattern of gears entwined with soaring birds. Her pale blue eyes swept over the crowd, now a tapestry of faces from every caste, noble families dressed in their finest, artisans and mechanics in their practical attire, and children wide-eyed with wonder. The collective energy was palpable, a mixture of hope, excitement, and a touch of nervousness. Beside her stood Kale, soot-streaked but radiant. His lean frame had been cleaned and dressed in sturdy clothes that bore the marks of his mechanic life but were freshly mended and neat. His sharp green eyes shone with anticipation, reflecting the glint of the newly unveiled flying machine resting on the platformer marvel of brass and polished wood, steam gently sighing from its pistons. This machine symbolized not just technological progress, but a promise that flight and freedom would no longer be privileges of the few. As Alara stepped forward to speak, her voice rang clear and steady across the crowd. Today marks a new dawn for our city. No longer will our dreams be bound by the invisible chains of caste. From this day forward, the skies belong to all who dare to dream and work to soar. A swell of cheers erupted, echoing off the floating platforms and steam vents. Kale took the microphone next, his tone warm yet firm. This city was built on the ingenuity and sweat of all its people. It's time our machines and our dreams reflect that unity. Together, we will repair not just engines, but the broken bonds between us. Mira moved through the crowd, her agile form weaving between groups with practiced ease. Her curly auburn hair was pulled back, and her sharp dark eyes sparkled with pride as she caught glimpses of children from the lower castes clutching their parents' hands, faces aglow with excitement at the prospect of their first flight lessons. Myra's own secret romance, once fraught with danger, now found hope in this changing world. Joran stood nearby, his broad shoulders squared and hands clean but still bearing faint traces of oil. He exchanged a hopeful glance with Kale, both men recognizing the long road still ahead but taking solace in the progress made. The rebellion's ideals had blossomed into something greater, movement toward a fairer, freer society. As the ceremony reached its climax, the first group of mixed-caste students were called forward. They climbed aboard the flying machines, their laughter and nervous chatter filling the plaza with life. At a signal, the engines roared to life, steam billowing as the machines lifted gracefully into the sky, their silhouettes dancing against a backdrop of fiery sunset hues. It was a breathtaking sight, symbol of breaking chains and soaring into uncharted futures. Lord Varick watched from a distance, his imposing figure softened by the dusk. Though reluctant, even he could not deny the city's transformation. The old order was fading, replaced by a new era where hope and unity soared higher than any machine. As the crowd dispersed into the glowing evening, Alara and Kale lingered on the platform. Their hands brushed briefly, a silent promise exchanged amidst the fading light. The journey was far from over, but together, they had sparked a flame that would light the way forward for generations to come. "This is only the beginning," Alara whispered, her eyes shining with determination. "Our city will fly higher than ever before because now we all rise together." Kale nodded, his voice steady with conviction. "And we'll keep flying, no matter the storms ahead." Their smiles held the weight of dreams fulfilled and battles yet to come, a testament to the power of love, hope, and the courage to change the world. The skies were no longer just a place for the privileged, they belonged to all who dared to dream. As the stars began to twinkle above the floating city, the first echoes of laughter and engine hums drifted into the night, a lullaby of freedom, unity, and the endless possibilities of flight. And so, the city soared into a new era, its heart beating stronger and freer than ever before. The grand hall was alive with a hum of voices, a mixture of anticipation and caution vibrating through the air. Alara stood at the center, her silver hair catching the flickering light of the chandeliers above, her pale blue eyes scanning the gathered council. Around her sat former rebels alongside nobles who had reluctantly accepted the new order, their faces etched with the scars of conflict and the weight of responsibility. The city was no longer held together by steam and iron alone, but by fragile alliances and the hope for a better future. "We have come far," Alara began, her voice steady but warm, "yet the path ahead demands even greater courage. Our city is wounded, its people divided by years of oppression and rebellion. Now we must rebuild not just our machines, but our trust in one another." Whispers stirred among the council. Joran, seated near the edge, exchanged a glance with Myra, who sat poised with a calm yet alert demeanor. Both bore the marks of their past lives. Joran's oil-stained hands now rested on the polished wood of the council table, a symbol of his transition from saboteur to statesman. Myra's sharp eyes scanned the room, ever vigilant for threats to their fragile peace. Kale entered the hall quietly, his presence grounding the room. His soot-streaked face and practical attire contrasted with the formal setting, yet his sharp green eyes shone with a new purpose. He took his place beside Alara, a living testament to the unity they had forged. The city's workshops, once secret and exclusive, were now open to all castes, buzzing with the sounds of innovation and collaboration. The clang of tools, the hiss of steam, and the murmur of ideas filled the air, a vibrant symphony of progress. Yet, beneath the surface of hope, tensions simmered. Lady Isolde, the once unyielding royal adviser, now softened by the passage of time and the undeniable change